fans hopefully some motivation, words of wisdom, so that they can carry on and go forward after that exhilarating playoff series by the Rangers and this dreary baseball season by the Phillies. Hopefully she can motivate us and give us some insight and help us carry on a little bit.
Yeah, I think the sports fans in this area need some picking up at this point. It's still a long way from football season, so. Exactly,
and we'll also have on from columnist from PWInsider.com, a wrestling expert, talking some wrestling with us in a few minutes, Mike Johnson, and we'll get into some wrestling talk. As always, we open up the phone lines to anyone who would like to call in and be part of the inclusion revolution. Jenny Lynn Adams will talk to us a little bit about that later on, and I just like that term, inclusion revolution. And Jenny Lynn will talk to us a little bit more. We like to include everybody in the show, especially our board-op dean. And we want everybody to take part. Whatever you want, whatever is on your sporting mind, feel free to call in. Phone numbers are 856-232-7077, 856-232-7078.
Yeah, we got plenty of topics today besides wrestling, and we got obviously the U.S. Open in golf. We've got the World Cup getting going down there in South America. We of course have baseball that is continuing to go on, although in this town it's more I guess a wait for the shoes to start dropping and players to start training. Although, with the Phillies winning some games here and having a pretty good homestand, they've lost only one game on the homestand. It's looking like the Phillies. I mean, if they can go down to Atlanta and sweep them, they'd be like a game back in the division, surprisingly. So. Like I said, though, the first step, I think, is to try and get to 500. But, hey, the division being what it is, they go down to Atlanta here, they win 2 out of 3 or sweep Atlanta, and all of a sudden, they're right in the division race. So they might be buyers rather than sellers.
Well, I think a lot of people would hope that they would be sellers rather than buyers. But again, I mean, you got to look at Ruben Amaro.
He's not going to sell if they're a game and a half out of the division. I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at that point.
No, and if you heard Jimmy Rollins, and we'll talk about him in a little bit too, becoming the Phillies franchise all-time hits leader,
the all-time hit king.
Yes, and the Phillies right now in the division are only 5.5 games out, which would put them in the hunt for the division. And I know a lot of Phillies fans are of the opinion that they want Ruben Amaro to start selling off the pieces of the team, the Chase Utleys, the Jimmy Rollinses, if they could, the Ryan Howards. But Ryan Howard realistically is not going to be going anywhere.
That guy's an anchor. That guy is just stuck over there at first base. So
contractually and via his output, they're not getting the return on their dollar for Ryan Howard. But being only 5.5 games out, like you said, if they go on a winning streak, they can certainly crawl back into it. And then if you're Ruben Amaro, if you're the Phillies ownership, from their perspective, they look at it and they're going to probably want to roll with Chase and Jimmy and Bird and all the other, Dominic Brown and Carlos Ruiz. They're just going to want to keep rolling with this current group and see what they can get out of it. And like Mark Eckel said last week when we had him on, it's all about making the playoffs, because once you're in there, anything can happen.
Right, that's the key. Once you get into there, if you're one of the 4 teams with a chair, in the dance, that's really that's why I'm saying that, that Ruben may yet be a buyer in this division the way it is.
Exactly. And Atlanta hasn't put the division away. The Washington hasn't put it away yet.
Larry's team is kind of a mess. The New York Mets.
Exactly. Phillies and the Mets are actually percentage points ahead of the Phillies. Mets have a percentage of 441. The Phillies right now are standing at 439. So the Mets are actually, even though they're both 5.5 games out, Mets are actually percentage points ahead of the Phillies. But in terms of the playoff race, they're virtually tied. And like it or not, the Phillies ownership and Ruben Amaro may look at that 5.5 and come to the conclusion that we want to roll. We want to keep this thing going. I put all the chips in the center of the table. I re-signed Utley, re-signed Rollins, re-signed Chooch. Let's roll with this and see what we got. And Amaro, like it or not, I said this earlier, is actually fighting for his job. He wants to show that the moves that he made are the correct ones. That he doesn't need to sell off Jimmy. He doesn't need to sell off Chase at this time. We want to roll with this one last time. And if you heard Jimmy after the game last night, Jimmy came up a couple of times during the interview and was of the opinion that he doesn't want to leave. He wants to see if he and Chase and Ryan Howard and Bird and Chooch, can have this one last run in them.
And just to give people a little bit of a heads up, the Phillies have posted their lineup for today facing the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs lineup is not yet available, but Sandberg has posted his lineup. Ben Revere will bat leadoff in center field, followed by Jimmy Rollins at shortstop. Chase Utley batting third as usual at second base. Marlon Byrd batting fourth in right field. Carlos Ruiz batting fifth at catcher. Dominic Brown in left field batting sixth. John Mayberry at first base batting seventh. Ronnie Cedeno at third base batting eighth, and batting ninth and pitching A.J. Burnett. So that is your lineup for this Sunday afternoon.
So you said
Ryan Howard obviously is getting a breather today in the lineup.
And what position did you say Cedeno's playing?
That would be third base.
So Reed Brignac is also getting a bit of a breather today.
Probably facing a left-hander. Thinking right now. Of course, the Cubs haven't posted their lineup, so we'll see.
But if you look at it, not a real imposing lineup, though.
No, and the problem is that Dominic Brown is a problem in this lineup. He's really somebody who probably would be a bench player on a lot of teams right now. I mean, you go, but once you get by Carlos Ruiz, you're looking at 6, 7, and 8 of Brown, Mayberry, and Cedeno. That's not the most, and then of course the pitcher and Burnett. So. Not the most imposing lineup, but hey, Sandberg's obviously trying to get some guys on his bench, some at bats, and move some guys in and keep them fresh. So
exactly, want to let people know if you'd like to join in, whatever on your sporting mind, feel free to call 856-232-7077, 856-232-7078. And as I said, we'll have Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com calling up in a few minutes, as well as Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams. She'll be joining us as well. If you have any questions for them, feel free to give us a call or visit our Facebook page or we're on Twitter. You can tweet me, Jay Selner, at Sports Skillet, and we'll take your questions for either one of those two. Getting back to the Phillies discussion for a minute, we did have history being made by Jimmy Rollins yesterday, becoming the all-time hits leader. And the thing about Jimmy Rollins becoming the all-time hits leader now, he has that full no trade clause, so he decides when he's going to leave the Phillies. And with each hit that he gets going forward, that makes it tougher for somebody else to break the record. Now, he took the record over for Mike Schmidt, and Schmidt's record lasted a while. But Jimmy Rollins, as I say, with each subsequent hit that he gets in a Phillies uniform, puts that record more and more out of reach for somebody else to try and get. So if Jimmy Rollins, let's say, wants to end his career as a Philly, he can certainly do that, because he can refuse a trade and make that hits mark almost, I won't say it's unreachable, but make it all the more difficult for somebody else to try and take the record away from him.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy really you look at on the team now that could do it right now is Chase Utley, and he's pretty far behind Jimmy. So
yeah, it wouldn't be
it wouldn't be anybody there now. It would be somebody in the way into the future. So it would just be Jimmy kind of setting the pace, and then putting that and trying to do 3,000 hits. I mean, is he could he get that? Probably. I think 3,000 is probably out of his range. In terms of that, but there's a lot of controversy that surrounds Jimmy. We know that he's been that way. I mean, the guy doesn't walk enough for a number of people. He doesn't, have the greatest on base percentage for a guy who's batted leadoff for most of his career. And of course, he has been benched a number of times by his former manager and Charlie Manuel. So. For lack of hustle. So there's always been that way, but I think, Philly really rallied around this kind of mark and really gave, I mean, we were there Friday night, and it was a great ovation. I mean, it was a great, it was the loudest I think I've heard it all year, all season, when he tied the record. There weren't a lot of fans there, but the fans that were there really made it seem rather loud. So, congratulations to Jimmy for doing it, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully he can, continue to, build this record into the make this record really a table. Although I do think it's going to be it's always tough when you're talking about a Schmidt record and trying to beat it. For example, Ryan Howard, everybody thought Ryan Howard was going to be the one to pass Schmidt in terms of home runs, over 500 home runs, and that's looking like it's not going to happen at all right now. So that's why I say that it's tough. So, but Jimmy's been the captain, so to speak, of this team. But I think also Chase Utley has been the guy that fans really have gravitated to, opposed to Jimmy. So.
Absolutely, and it was really great to see Jimmy tie the record on Friday, and then get the record yesterday, and I'm sure that's a weight off his shoulders as well going forward. He'll be, now that he's gotten the record and put all the hoopla kind of behind him, he can relax a little bit more at the plate, and he's actually drawn it out over the past few games too.
Yeah, one hit in every game. It's been 1-1-1-1 hit. It's a nice hitting streak, but like I said, he's just for some reason he just rubs some Philly fans the wrong way. I mean, because like I said, the lack of hustle, and then of course the fact that they get annoyed because he's not Lenny Dykstra. Lenny Dykstra, I think, was Lenny Dykstra didn't set the hit record, but he did. But obviously, Lenny obviously was a better on base percentage guy, around 400 on base in his career. So,
yeah, and it really was. And I think what we'll do now is turn our attention a little bit to the sport of pro wrestling. We have Mike on the line from PWInsider.com. Mike, how you doing?
Morning, guys. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. Doing anything special to celebrate?
Right after I get done with you guys, I'm heading over to meet my dad and take him out for some lunch, and then I'm going to try to have a nice, relaxing day.
Nice.
I have to keep my sanity because I have to cover a wrestling pay-per-view tonight, so that's going to...
Oh, yes, anniversary, yes.
Take a little out of me by the end of the day.
Yes. I think a lot of people are maybe looking forward to Slammiversary. How do you think that's going to go down, Mike?
It's an interesting time for TNA Wrestling because they're in a situation where the storylines haven't really been clicking. The bigger stars that they've had as part of the company, like Sting and Hulk Hogan, have departed for other possibly greener pastures, and they're really struggling to find something that's going to click for them. The TV show of late, partially because it's taped so far in advance, and partially because it's a bunch of new characters who have been tossed into the deep end of the pool and are expected to generate interest and ratings for the company, hasn't really worked. I'm hoping this show will be like the beginning of them kind of turning the corner, but they're kind of like the Charlie Brown promotion of late, where they're under the black cloud because MVP, who used to be in WWE and is now in TNA as a top villain, he ended up tearing his meniscus. So yesterday they announced that they were pretty much changing the entire main event picture, and their champ Eric Young is going to wrestle two competitors to be named based on how they do in undercard matches on the show. So I think it's all up in the air. I think everybody wants that promotion to do well, but I think if you really pay attention to them and you've been around watching them for some time, there's always this endless cycle where there's a little bit of hope and then you end up beating your head against the wall because it just doesn't really pan out.
Yeah, they really don't have a catchy storyline right now,
No, they're kind of like the New York Mets of pro wrestling, where no matter what they do, it just doesn't work. So, it's sad in a way, but the good thing with wrestling is, since it's a week-to-week thing, there's always a chance to reboot it and take it in a new direction, but we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And they're supposed to be coming up to this area, the New York tri-state area soon.
Yeah, they have a couple of tapings this coming week in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And then the following week, they have 3 tapings in New York City at the Manhattan Center Grand Ballroom, which is around the corner from Madison Square Garden. So between those 5 tapings, they're probably taping like 6 or 7 weeks of television. So I don't know how anyone's going to be able to keep their head on straight just watching all that in one sitting. But God bless them if they can do it.
And, Mike, you guys had an interesting piece, and we want everybody to check out their website, pwinsider.com. You guys had an interesting piece on there about when TNA comes up to the Northeast, about it being a rebirth for the brand.
Yeah, well, what I pretty much... I wrote the piece that you're speaking of about a week or 2 ago.
Yep.
And what I pretty much said was, they cannot continue to present the product in the way that it's being presented. It's one thing to present something that's sort of a listless product, and the wrestlers are being given 3 minutes to do matches, and there's all these talking segments that go on and on and on in a pseudo sport that's built around action, and at its core, it's 2 guys fighting to figure out a conclusion to their issues or to win a title. And you've got all of this kind of bloated, endless storylines about who's in control of the power, and nothing ever really seems to get resolved. And what I wrote is, if they walk into New York City with fans who are paying upwards of $75 a ticket to go, as opposed to fans who are getting into the shows for free because they're taped at Universal Studios in Florida, that audience is a blue-collar, diehard wrestling audience. They want action, they want violence, they want they want heroes that are going to kick ass, they want villains that are going to cheat, and they want to feel like, because it's a major market and they're paying a top ticket price, they want to feel like they've got something for their dollar. They're action. These are fans that are action junkies. That's why they like an alternative version of pro wrestling beyond just WWE. And if TNA goes in there, or if anybody goes into that market and gives them the type of product that TNA has presented on their own television show in the last couple of months, that audience is going to reject it very viciously and in a verbal sense. And they're going to create a situation where TNA is taping in the biggest market of the world with executives from the network that they're still negotiating a new TV deal with, because they're TV deal with Spike ends in October, and it could be a pretty embarrassing situation for the company. It would be the equivalent of the home team getting booed out of the building. And there have been times where Ring of Honor, another wrestling company, has run the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is a bigger room in that same complex.
Mm-hmm.
And when former TNA guys show up to compete in Ring of Honor, the fans will chant F TNA because they look at TNA as this company that has just squandered their gifts, and they don't present anything those fans want to see. So now you're talking about these fans are going to be the same fans who possibly go and attend the TNA show, and if you don't give them something that they want and they want to embrace and they want to enjoy, those fans are going to be very vocal about their distaste. And, it's no different than South Philly fans or Jersey fans. When you're paying a top dollar for an event, you want to feel like you got more than you paid for. And TNA at times, they don't do that, and it could be ugly for them.
Why? Let's switch topics here. Latest headline on your website. Why the WWE Network is a failure. So what's wrong with the WWE Network right now?
The patriarch of PW Insider, Dave Scherer, wrote that. He's the founder of the site. Basically what happened is WWE launched an over-the-top network, video on demand, and a linear 24/7 streaming network a couple of months ago. They've put holders, this is the future of the company, and between not getting a television deal that was as impressive to stockholders as WWE kind of touted it would be with NBC Universal, and the fact that the network, which now airs their pay-per-views for free, it's a $10 a month charge, and then you can watch it as opposed to paying $35 to $45 to $75 per event via pay-per-view. So you're getting all this stuff for $10 a month versus a 3-hour event for one price. As of the first time they've announced the subscribers, they've only gotten 667,000 subscribers. And it has been something that's really made stockholders worried because they're giving up all this guaranteed pay-per-view revenue to create this new revenue stream, but we're not seeing any sign that it's actually going to happen. We're actually seeing that it's cannibalizing WWE profits. And Dave Scherer wrote a piece about one of the reasons this thing is not working, in his estimation, is that the content that they are creating is not must-see content for the type of fans who want to pay for it. And he talked a lot about the problems in WWE's production right now. They've got John Cena, who's been their flag bearer for a long time. They have not moved anybody else up to kind of be at his level, and they always rely on him. And while that's great for the younger audience, for an older audience, he's a character that can burn out very easily, and he's been on top forever. And Hulk Hogan had the same problem. He powered through the 80s, and then when he got to the early 90s, it was like, all right, we've seen this act. It needs to be changed up. And eventually WWE did change it up. It took them probably until 97, 98 when Steve Austin and The Rock got hot for them to really kind of return to the heights that they had in the 80s. Maybe they were a little bit beyond that. But I think they're at the same point now with John Cena. They've had a lot of top talent that's been injured or has quit the company and departed the company. And a lot of the stories are very similar to TNA, but not as bad. A little bit of lacking in the logic, and at times they stretch the credibility of the talent. And there are guys who the audience sees as talent that they want to see as top heroes or as top wrestlers because they're just great athletically and they're very good and they've got strong personalities that the audience is connected to. Dolph Ziggler is a great example of that. Cesaro is a great example of that. But for whatever reason, WWE will never pull the trigger on them. And over time, these characters get exposed and the audience gets taught you don't need to care about them. They're just middle-of-the-card guys. They're not that important. And then when they finally tap them on the shoulder and go, okay, it's your turn to run with the ball, you've already taught the audience not to care about these guys. Zack Ryder, a couple of years ago, was one of the hottest characters in WWE. He was a self-made guy. He went on the Internet. He really connected with the audience. Madison Square Garden one night, which was chanting his name while The Rock was in the ring. And The Rock is the biggest thing, biggest crossover star in the history of pro wrestling. And he was a hot guy. Well, was he ever going to be like a tip-top guy who went and drew the money and headline shows? Probably not. But as an entertaining character that people wanted to see in the mix and paid to see in the mix and wanted to wear his merchandise, absolutely. And over time, WWE, they just kind of put the foot on the brakes, It kills his momentum, and now he's just this guy that's sitting at the bottom of the show, hardly on television, and that was an asset they could have used greater. And at one point he was selling a lot of merchandise, and now he's not doing anything, and he's just sitting there. And there are a lot of guys like that. Maybe they're not treated as badly as him, but there are guys that the audience chants for, and the audience wants to see win, and the audience wants to see in top positions, and they're willing to pay to see them. And for whatever reason, WWE and their creative side does not do that. And that's one of the frustrating parts of being a wrestling fan that really loves that world and really pays attention to it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can kind of see when guys are ready to peak, and then when it doesn't happen, you get a little disenfranchised about it.
What do you see happening with CM Punk here in the near future?
I don't think he's coming back. I would not be shocked. I don't know anything, but I would not be shocked to see if at some point that ends up in some sort of showdown in the courts over his contract and money owed. Because if he, for those who don't know, he was a top guy there. He walked out at the beginning of the year, pretty much out of nowhere. And since then, we've seen him pop up, not in the wrestling world, but he made an appearance on AMC's Talking Dead. And he's done a bunch of appearances locally in Chicago where he lives. And he looks a million times healthier than he did the last couple of years working for WWE. And he looks a million years more well-rested as opposed to the guy that was in the grind of that schedule. I don't think he's going to go back. I don't think he's willing to step back into that world. But the situation is he left in January. His contract was up sometime. Actually, we're in June. It would be sometime next month his contract would have been up. So now you've got 6 months there where WWE was selling merchandise and making money off of him, but he wasn't around and he wasn't there to work. So I really think that unless the two sides come to some sort of agreement to kind of just let the two ships pass in the night and break whatever contractual obligations they had, at some point, if you're WWE, you're going to have to stand up and say, we put money into you and we didn't make that money off of you, so you're going to have to owe us something. And on the other side, if you're CM Punk, you're looking at it like, I have done all this for you. I know you've earned millions of dollars off my back, and maybe I've made a lot of money, but I hit the breaking point and I had to leave, and you cannot tell me I've got to come back, and you can't tell me that the money that you still made after I left is not at least partially owed to me. So I can see where the two sides are probably at some point going to hit heads. If this was all like a storyline part of the show, they've had two major shows in Chicago in his hometown where those would have been the major storyline plot periods to bring him back and get a nice big reaction from his hometown crowd, which he's like a folk hero there. They love him, and build him into a pay-per-view situation where he can draw the company some money as a personality. And it hasn't happened. I think it's legitimately one of these rare issues in pro wrestling where a guy is going to step outside of that bubble and go on to the next chapter of his life. I will sincerely, and I write about wrestling, and I cover it, and I talk to a lot of people in that world, I will sincerely be surprised if he steps back into that world anytime soon as a performer.
Wow. So you don't foresee him eventually ending up in, let's say, a promotion like Ring of Honor, or I doubt he would go to TNA because they've been selling off a lot of their major talents. But you don't foresee him ending up in a promotion like Ring of Honor or something like that?
Well, I kind of look at it like this. If you work for WWE and you've been a top guy there and you've made so much money, and by my estimation, he had to have made millions of dollars over his run from 2006 to 2014. Why, if you work for the Yankees, do you want to go play AAA ball? And whether whether wrestling fans want to hear that or not, on the perspective of the most potential that a guy can earn, WWE, for all their faults or all their strengths, whichever way you want to look at them, they are the place where the guys can go make the most money in the least amount of time. I don't see him wanting to go back to a smaller place and work just as hard, if not harder, for a smaller salary. Because I don't think either Ring of Honor or TNA, both of which were companies that he worked for over the years at different points in his career, can match the level of income that he was generating working for WWE. And it's just a matter of economics. I also think, he was always a very goal-driven guy, and I think he got to the point where he hit all his goals, except for maybe being a WrestleMania main event guy, and he probably realized, I'm breaking down my body, I'm hurting, I'm not going to peak beyond where I am, so So what am I still doing here? It's time for me to go. And, unlike a lot of wrestlers who just want to stay on that grind and kind of work themselves half to death, he's always been a guy who, when it was time for him to move on and do something else, he did it. When he left Ring of Honor, he said in interviews, he woke up one day and he realized it was time for him to go, and he decided he was going to go to WWE, and he set that as his goal, and he got into WWE, and then he set upon his goal of being a top guy, and it worked for him. I just don't see him coming back into pro wrestling. Now, MMA, that's possible. He's often talked about that, but wrestling, no.
Wow. And we are talking with Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com. Mike, the other hot topic that's about is the rumored entrance into the WWE by Sting. Do you have any update on that?
Yeah, they're obviously building a relationship. He's going to be in their annual video game, which is titled, the new game is titled WWE 2K15, and it'll be out this fall. And they actually are filming Take-Two Entertainment, which is the video game company, 2K Sports. They're actually filming some vignettes for a Sting commercial with an orchestra that's going to be painted like him, and some other guys that'll be painted like him, and that's the commercial for the video game. I have to think at some point we will see him in a WWE ring, but my guess is it won't be to something like a WrestleMania, where this year it's in San Jose, California, not far from where he lives. And, he's an older guy. The name value of Sting in WWE can be maximized once or twice for a major show. And then after that, it's going to be the trickle-down effect. So to me, you save him, you prime him, you tease him as a character, and then you come in at a WrestleMania where there's a peak audience interest, and maybe you will get people from outside of the usual pay-per-view audience that will order it just for the novelty of, hey, Sting's going to be on a WWE show for the first time in his career, because he's one of the few guys who's never worked for them. From his entire career when he debuted in 1985, he never worked for them one day in his life. And there's not a lot of guys who were major superstars on a national and international level in the last 20, 30 years that can say that. In fact, if you put me on the spot right now, I'd be hard-pressed to think of another one. I can't think of one.
Very quickly, Mike, what is your opinion right now of the Shield in terms of the angle they're doing with them?
I didn't mind the angle. I think they needed to do something to really kind of shake things up a little bit, because Daniel Bryan, the WWE champion, was injured. John Cena and Randy Orton are both dealing with minor injuries right now. They're a little banged up. They needed something unique to build to their next pay-per-view, Money in the Bank, at the end of the month in Boston. And the idea of turning Seth Rollins against his two partners, Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, was a shocking moment, because at the beginning of the night, probably didn't see it coming. They were at the apex of where they were. They had just beaten Triple H's dastardly trio of goons, Evolution, on television and on pay-per-view a couple of times. And they were a real cornerstone act that people loved, and there was a lot of money to be made with that group. The idea of breaking off Seth Rollins and programming him to wrestle his former partners, Reigns and Ambrose, there's money there, as long as they follow up with it, and Rollins becomes featured upon and focused on, like he's a bigger star now that he's broken away from them, and that he's on the level of the other top villains of the company, as opposed to like being their lackey and running around and doing their bidding. It's a great idea. If it's going to be a situation where suddenly he went from being part of this big, heroic, badass, kick-ass group, and now he's a lapdog running around for villains like Triple H and Randy Orton, well, now you traded in one asset for something that's not going to be as much of an interest and as much of a moneymaker for the company, and that's always a bad idea. To me, you want to maximize everything that you do, every tweak that you make, every time you turn a guy from good guy to bad guy, every time you change the title, you got to go, if we do this, will we make more money? If we do this, will we generate more interest? And if the answer is yes, and you follow up on it, then it's always a good idea. If they drop the ball on that, and at times WWE does that, so does every other wrestling company. It's just like having a general manager in baseball, and all of a sudden they trade guys, and you look at them, and you're like, what the hell are they thinking? And they end up with a bunch of goofs instead of guys that can hit grand slams. If WWE drops the ball on a creative end, it was a mistake to change it up, and time will tell on that one. It's only been a week since they've done it, so we got to let it play out.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for calling in. We were talking with Mike. We were talking with Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com. We want to encourage everybody to check out your website. Mike, thanks so much for calling in. We do appreciate it.
And happy Father's Day.
We lost him early.
Yeah. All right, and we're going to turn our attention now, or hopefully get some words of motivation, wisdom, and encouragement from Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams. Jenny Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Now, where are you now? Because you were fresh off your appearance at the Brewhouse Gallery in Florida. Are you still down in Florida?
I am. I'm in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida.
Nice. How's the weather down there?
Well, during the day it's sunny, and at night it's been stormy.
Hate those storms. How was your appearance at the Brewhouse Gallery?
It went really well.
We saw some pictures that you posted on Facebook, and it looks like it was an awesome night for everybody that came out.
Yeah. It was kind of magical. Everything came into place, and I shared my story and my platform, and then I sang a song for everyone, and then I danced. I did an interpretive dance for everybody.
Yeah. I saw your dancing on YouTube, and you are one heck of a dancer, let me tell you.
Oh, thank you.
And I love the song you were dancing to, too.
Oh, thank you.
And I checked out your party tunes. You and I share a lot of the same party tunes that we like.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Absolutely. The other thing...
It's like anything that makes me move. You know?
Absolutely. The other thing, we were talking at the top of the show, I love your use of the words inclusion revolution.
Thank you. Yes, that's my platform.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So inclusion revolution has mostly to do with the inclusion model of education. Growing up, my parents had to fight really hard to keep me in the mainstream classes. Usually the answer in public schools for anyone with a disability is to put them into a special education classroom separate from their peers. And there are numerous studies that show the effects of being separate from your peers and what that does to your self-esteem and to your self-perception in society. And it also is vice versa. The mainstream students see students with disabilities in a sequestered classroom, and they begin to think that people with disabilities are over there and we don't really interact with them. And so it is starting to become a widespread practice for public schools to participate in the inclusion model of education, which is making sure that the special education students are included in the mainstream classes as much as their ability allows. And there are a lot of schools still that are not following that model, and actually it is now the law. Since 2004, they added a new clause to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which talks about exactly that, that special education students are to be included in the mainstream classes. And so there's a lot of schools that are on board with that and some that haven't quite gotten there yet. So one of the main things I've been doing is going into schools and presenting my anti-bullying campaign, and then also working with the staff in, getting them on board with the inclusion model of education. So that's one aspect of my of Inclusion Revolution. Another aspect of it, too, is just in general advocating for people with disabilities in the arts and in transportation and in the workplace. So I've done a lot of presentations for corporate businesses throughout this year, and just really encouraging an inclusive environment. So really, just in general, celebrating inclusion and talking about inclusion and getting people inspired that inclusion is powerful and that it changes people's lives.
That is just great. Now, you also have a book that's out?
I do. It is called Dreams Come True by Jennifer Adams, and you can find it on Amazon.com.
Nice. And if you could give our listeners a little synopsis about what the book is about.
Yes. So I wrote this book to go along with the anti-bullying message of my platform. And basically, it's written for school-age kids, but everyone that reads it says they're inspired. It's basically a scrapbook form of my story. So it's got pictures of me growing up and pictures of me now, and just kind of takes people through the journey of my story of experiencing being teased when I was in school, and how that made me feel, but then also experiencing the power of acceptance and encouragement and the power of words in my life. And then at the end of the book, it takes the reader through some exhortations about the power of their words and the power of their story.
Nice. Now, you mentioned that anti-bullying is a big platform that you stand for, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about that, about maybe your experiences and how you kind of dealt with it?
Absolutely. So, really any young kid looks different or stands out in some way with a difference, whether it's a disability or any kind of unique difference in their in the way that they look or the way they talk or anything like that, they're most likely going to be a target for bullying. It's just kind of the way the world works. And so I realize that my situation is not original by any means, but I did experience being teased, especially in middle school. I don't know if the listeners right now know, but I was born with partial limbs, and so I was in a wheelchair, and I basically have my left arm to my elbow and then my legs to my knees, and I have no right arm at all. And so looking different like that, especially in those middle school years when that just seems to be a time in school where kids start really picking apart the differences in people, and the teasing gets really bad. And so I was scared to go to school. I remember feeling sick to my stomach every morning, and basically school was a war zone for me. It wasn't a happy place or a place I looked forward to going to. And when I graduated from high school, the teasing kind of continued in high school. Not as bad, but it was more of a general rejection. And so I had maybe like 4 or 5 friends, and we would kind of hang out in the back of the school because we were all the ones that were getting teased and all that. So I just kind of had a self-perception of myself that I was rejected, that I was not beautiful, or, I just didn't have a great self-esteem. But one thing that I did have was a knowledge of my gifts and talents, and I can attribute that to my parents, this is perfect because it's Father's Day. And so happy Father's Day, Dad, if you're listening. I'll share this with him for sure. But they really encouraged my gifts and talents. They saw early on that I had an aptitude for singing and anything that had to do with the stage or being in front of people. They caught on early when I was 4 years old, and they took me to a local rodeo, and they lost me somehow, and I had hopped away from them out of my wheelchair up to the announcer stand and told the announcer that I wanted to talk on the microphone. And so he had given me the microphone and was telling me what to say. And so they heard me over the loudspeaker, and they were just kind of shocked at my gutsiness, and also that I didn't sound like a 4-year-old. And so they kind of saw all these things early on, and they started me in voice lessons when I was 6 years old. I had a voice teacher named Melody, which I think is very appropriate. And she would come over every Wednesday from age 6 to 18 when I graduated from high school. Then I went to Pacific Lutheran University, and I studied classical music. And so throughout that time in my school years, that was kind of the one thing that I knew that I was good at, and whenever I sang or performed on stage, it would show me what I was made of. Also, when I was 16 years old, I had my first public speaking engagement. I spoke in front of 2,000 youth at a youth conference in Seattle, Washington, and I just remember thinking to myself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so there was little glimmers of that, of my future and my gifts and talents, and that's kind of what helped me rise above the aspects of like being teased and having a low self-esteem. But when I went to Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, it was a whole new experience. I experienced being accepted and encouraged, and that experience really turned around my life and the way that I saw myself. It was very healing, and I started to see my future with hope, and that the dreams that I'd been dreaming as a young kid and as a youth started to feel real, because I was no longer in the war zone. I was now in a peaceful zone where I had tons of friends, a lot of encouragement, a lot of support, and a lot of encouragement. And so through those two kind of black and white experiences, I've learned the power of words, and now that's kind of the message that I'm spreading is through my own story and my own experience, that hurtful words tear down and encouraging words build up.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Jenny. And personally, I don't see how anybody could teach with all your energy and how beautiful you are. I don't see how anybody could possibly teach you. But I have a question for you. Going forward to the pageant itself, how long did it take you before you took off the crown?
Oh, you mean after I won the title? Yep. It's funny because I won the crown. I won the title and got crowned, and I wore it till I think 1 in the morning. I got crowned at about 9 p.m. and we kind of partied, and I did a bunch of interviews with like media, and then I had to wake up at 6 a.m. the very next morning, or I think it was 5:30 or something like that, for a local morning show. And so I got like maybe 4.5 hours of sleep, put the crown back on, and went to a local ABC news station where they interviewed me. No, actually it was Fox News. Okay. And then I wore the crown that whole day. There's like the Queen's breakfast, and then I actually wanted to take the crown off, but my friend that came with me wanted me to wear it on the airplane because it was kind of fun to show it off. So I wore it on the airplane home, and I didn't get home till about midnight that next night. So aside from maybe 4.5 hours while I was sleeping, I think I wore it for a good, 20, 24 hours straight.
Wow. For those of us who our listeners that may not be aware, what actually went into training for the pageant itself? Did you have any special routines that you did or practiced, or what actually went into becoming Miss Wheelchair America?
Preparing. Well, it was something that I had my sights on for a few years. I learned about the Miss Wheelchair America program in actually the year 2000, so it was a long time ago, and I was 19 at the time. And I remember thinking, I want to run when I, get out of college and am kind of in my career. And it kind of just went to the back of my mind. And in 2009, so almost exactly 10 years later, I met the reigning Miss Wheelchair Washington through a mutual friend. And we became good friends, and I kind of was, supporting her and encouraging her. We were just kind of running together that year that she was Miss Wheelchair Washington. She kind of showed me the ropes of what it means to be Miss Wheelchair Washington, and I just thought, this is what I want to do. I want to run for this title. And it wasn't actually till 2013 that I actually decided to run, because I was getting my anti-bullying campaign off the ground and starting my motivational speaking business. And I remember feeling like I wanted to feel established in that before I ran for the title. So 2013 just felt like my year. I remember waking up like New Year's Day in 2013 and kind of going through a list in my mind of what I wanted to hire, and Miss Wheelchair Washington was, the number one thing. I felt like this is my year to run for this title. So I did. I continued to build my anti-bullying campaign, ran for Miss Wheelchair Washington in March of 2013, and won the title. And then I spent the time that I was Miss Wheelchair Washington really building my platform and traveling as much as I could, getting into every school that I could, and just really maximizing my reign with the state title. I kept like a blog, which I still have, and I made a scrapbook, and I just really wanted to relish like every event and learn everything I could to have a strong platform for the national pageant. So it was July of 2013 that I went to the national pageant, and I took like 3 weeks off before the national pageant with no work, no events or anything, and I just spent that time getting mentally prepared and physically prepared, because there's a lot that goes into it with buying plane tickets and getting outfits and all the stuff that goes into being at a pageant for 6 days out of town. And so I spent that time really just getting as prepared as I possibly could, practicing my speech like crazy, and having a lot of conversations with people about the pageant and about my platform, and really allowing my platform to kind of settle in to my heart and exactly what I was going to stand for, and kind of just formulating the game plan of going in, and more than anything just making sure I was rested and adjusted and ready for the pageant. So that's what I did for a couple weeks before. And then when I went there, I just had the attitude that I'm going to make the best of this week. I, of course, really wanted the crown and the title, because I knew that it would open up national doors for my anti-bullying campaign, and just for the message of my story. And I really, really wanted it. Like, I wanted it more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. And so but I didn't go into it like with an attitude that I was going to just, take the crown or whatever. I said I'm going to go in there with a good attitude and just be myself and enjoy the week. And I met so many amazing women. I'm so thankful. It was such an amazing experience, so empowering. You get to hear workshops with people that have been in the advocacy world for years, and the resources that they provide during that week is incredible. And so I learned so much, and I actually really did enjoy my judging interviews. All the judges are amazing people, and I really felt like I just came out of my interviews feeling good and feeling like it was a positive experience. So when I got the crown at the end of the week, I was elated and so happy, like happier than I've ever been in my life. And it really was the cherry on top of an amazing week.
That's awesome. And for our listeners out there, we're talking to Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams. Jenny Lynn, real quick, where are you going to be appearing next, and how can people get their hands on your book?
Okay, so my next event is in Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa, in Cedar Falls, which is a suburb of Waterloo. And it's going to be at the University of Iowa. And basically they have a whole week-long camp for youth with mobility impairments. So I'm going to be flying in there and hanging out with the kids and doing a presentation with my platform. And then I'm going to fly there home, and on the 21st I have an adaptive dancing performance. So there's going to be several other adaptive dancers there, and we're all going to be performing for a fundraiser for adaptive sports in Seattle, Washington. So that's kind of what's on the horizon. Right after that is the Chicago Abilities Expo. So I still have, my reign isn't over till August, so I still got a lot on the books until then.
Nice. And how can people get their hands on your book?
They can go to Amazon.com, type in the title Dreams Come True, and the author Jennifer Adams.
Nice. Jenny Lynn, I want to thank you for coming on the Sports Skillet Show. We appreciate having you.
Oh, thank you so much. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to your father, Jenny Lynn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Boy, she is really fascinating to listen to her, and you can see why she's a tremendous motivational speaker. I mean, she has a lot of talent, and you know, you just find yourself sitting back and being captivated by what she has to say. To me, it's great to have somebody representing those people with disabilities, and having somebody advocating for them such as her.
Absolutely. And that was Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams. She gave you information. You can go to Amazon.com to find her book out there. I would definitely give it a read. Definitely worth reading. And I can see this hour has really flown by, Jeff, already. Talking to Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams, talking to Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com. Again, I think that's the authoritative website to go to for all pro wrestling information. And definitely check it out. We want to really thank both of them for coming on the show, taking some time out of their Father's Day celebrations, and coming on the show, giving us a few minutes of their time. Definitely, if you see Miss Wheelchair America, Jenny Lynn Adams, coming to your town, definitely go out and see her. Or you can check her out on YouTube. She has some videos up there of her interpretive dance and some of the places, talks that she's given. Definitely check it out. She's an awesome dancer. And again, you want to go to PWInsider.com. Check it out for all your pro wrestling information. I think it's the definitive website for any information about the world of pro wrestling. And again, check out our website too. You can go to Sports Skillet on Facebook. You can tweet us at Sports Skillet. Find my account there. Definitely check us out. Give us some likes. It's been, I think, a great hour, Jeff.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating hour. Enjoy the NBA Finals tonight. We'll see if the Spurs can close it out. There's golf today. There's a World Cup. Plenty of sports to go around today for anybody who decides to watch the sports. But get out and enjoy the day with all the fathers out there.
Absolutely. And you want to stay tuned to the Kevin Storm Show. He's coming up next. And again, a big thank you for Jenny Lynn Adams and Mike Johnson for coming on the show. We appreciate you guys coming on and giving us some fascinating information, talking to us. And again, check us out on Facebook, and you can tweet us at Sports Skillet. We appreciate having everybody this week, and stay tuned next for the Kevin Storm Show. And I'm sure we'll have a great show coming up. And we want to thank everybody for listening today.